You are listening to Draw 4 Podcast. Good tidings, and thanks for joining us. My name is Joseph Dunlap. I'm the executive producer of this little podcast and the Player 4 Network in general.
My name is Erin Campbell. I am the creator and host of the Deck Tease podcast, which is no longer around, but I'm also the creator and co-host of the Girlfriend Bracket, which is about women in magic, and also a co-host of Magic Mike's podcast featuring Evan Irwin and Ruben Bressler. And my primary MTG interest is Dredge.
Dredge, and more Dredge.
Exactly. If it doesn't involve the graveyard, I don't want it.
Hashtag you can't date me if...
Right. If you run graveyard hate, no, just...
So what did you do this past weekend?
I had the opportunity to play in the TCG Player Invitational 50K. It was actually in my backyard. It was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, about 15 minutes away from my apartment. And I found out I was able to go about 3 days before the event. I managed to get the 20 TCG points necessary to enter. I didn't have a lot of time to practice, but I did go, and I had a pretty good time. I scrubbed out the first day, and then I did not make day two, but they had a Platinum Modern event on Sunday, and then I came back and played Modern with my friend and co-host Chris, and we had a really good time and just had a good time meeting people. I had a meeting with the TO, which we'll talk about a little later, and it was just nice to see a lot of players I'd never met before, and of course some listeners as well.
What deck did you bring to it? I assumed you were bringing Eldrazi Ramp, and you set me straight on that.
I had been playing Eldrazi Ramp for about 2 weeks, and I just kept feeling like it was really clunky. You know, I just felt like I wasn't doing enough. I mean, I love a non-interactive deck as much as the next girl, but I typically like to be doing things while I'm ignoring you, and I was just sort of ignoring you and not doing anything. So it was like, I just didn't like that feeling. So I started off playing Green-Red Ramp, and then I moved on to a Naya Dragons list that one of my co-hosts had given me. Was having a lot of fun with it, but couldn't quite get the cards in paper in time. And so I discovered Ali Antrazi's 4-color dragons list, which he wrote about last week, and I loved it. I thought it was really cool, and had the cards for that, actually. And I dropped after the third round. I felt like everything that wasn't a Tarka Red, I felt really good about. Like, I felt like I had at least a 50-50 shot against, and then everything a Tarka Red, I felt like I had no chance against. And I got paired against a Tarka twice, so I was just like, yeah, this isn't very fun. And the more I thought about it, the more I can't help but feel like it's just a worse version of a better deck. You know, like they say, you don't want to do a worse version of something else. And I can't help but feel like, you know, if you want to play Rhinos, just play Abzan. And if you want to play Dragons, we'll just play Esper Dragons. And I feel like the deck is trying to do both when you could just do one thing really efficiently. So I don't really know what I'm going to do going forward. I'm going to GP Oakland next month. It's 30 days away, almost exactly a month away, and I have no idea what I'm going to play, so I'm kind of freaking out right now.
At any point when you were playing against all that Atarka Red, did you miss Jedi Offshoot?
No, not at all, because I died with a Siege Rhino on the board. Like, the way that the deck works is they just don't really care. You know, it was simply, you have the Monastery Swift Spirit, you slap a Become Immense on it, you slap a Temur Battle Rage on it. It now has double strike and trample, so, you know, the life gain isn't really that critical because they're just going to trample through it anyways. Like I said, I died with the Siege Rhino on board, and I was feeling pretty comfortable, you know, at my 19 life, and no, it just didn't matter. And then that makes Atarka really hard to deal with. You know, the mono red decks that I'm used to from previous standards, they would sort of overextend, you would do a board wipe, and then you'd point at them and laugh. And this deck can go wide. It can not commit to the board. It can simply do dash creatures and not really, you know, then your sorcery speed removal doesn't work. So it's very hard to attack the deck. I don't know very many standard decks that are happy to see a Tarka Red. Most of the people I talked to did not want to face it, and were just kind of like, if I see it, whatever, you know, like, they weren't really actively trying for it. I think Dark Jeskai does okay with it, but everybody else I talked to was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was definitely in that camp. And I think anything I'd want to play in the standard has a bad Atarka matchup. I'm definitely the kind of person where when I have a bad showing, I immediately am like, I take my ball and go play elsewhere. It's like, I'm going to go play this deck. Then I'm like, oh wait, that deck has a bad red matchup too. So I think it's just going to be one of those matchups you have to just kind of do a Kanye shrug, as I like to say, and be like, all right, like, you got it. And then there's nothing you can do about it.
It was actually a point that I think it was TJ and I were talking about, that with the absence of good removal and good counter spells and good instant speed anything, those who can benefit from things like Dash are just going to have a heyday. It's also a problem because Dark Jeskai is falling out of favor. We talked about it, I think, 2-3 weeks ago, that Dark Jeskai is
See, I disagree with that. I don't think it's that bad. Like, I know online it's still quite popular. The people that are playing it are very good at it. I think rumors of its demise have been exaggerated. I know I've had a couple of leagues where I do most of my testing on Magic Online. I'm running into it regularly. And there are people who, I think Todd Anderson just top aided with it. He's been a big proponent for it. My friend JD Klumparens just wrote an article talking about how Jeskai can adapt and stay around. And I don't think we've seen the last of it. I was more prepared for that deck than I was for Atarka. I don't think we've seen the last of it at all.
Yes, okay, you're right. It is not gone. It is at 10% of the meta right now, with Abzan a whopping 21%.
Right.
And that's just, and Atarka Red 17%. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing. Mardu Aggro showing up at 6%. So everything's just shifting around. I spent a whole episode last week talking about Modern being the Wild Wild West, but man, look at Standard. Except for Abzan.
Yeah, except for Abzan. But you are seeing these decks kind of adapt. And it's like, we said that about Esper Dragons too. Esper Dragons had weeks where people were ready to write it off and say it's not doing well. And then it came charging back in Brussels and Kobe. And so, I guess that's one thing you can say that's good about this Standard is that every deck is kind of having its day. Sam Black was doing well with the Black-White Warriors list. We saw an Esper Warriors list in Kobe. It looks like it's a very predictable format, but, in my experience between leagues and the championship, I'm still playing a nice variety of decks, and you're still seeing a nice mix at the tables. You're seeing this Esper Tokens deck that, is running a really nice mix of spells, and even the flying, it has what we call the Pregnant Eldrazi in it, it makes the little tokens and things like that, and there's actually a lot of variety in this format. It's quite deceiving.
An interesting thing is the emergence of 4-color Rally. When's the first time that you saw this deck?
Oh gosh, I was following it. I remember when it was just started off as the Aristocrats, and people saw the Zulaport Cutthroat, and people were really excited about that. And I was somebody who remembers the original Aristocrats that Tom Martell won the Pro Tour with, and I was committed to Jund in that Standard, so I couldn't exactly swap over to that deck. And it was also so close to rotation where I didn't want to invest in it. So I was one of the people seeing Zulaport Cutthroat and seeing Nantuko Husk and wanting to kind of live the dream and hoping that Aristocrats came back in some form. And then I remember at the Pro Tour there was the black-green version that Gabriel Nassif played, and then there was the black-blue version that Calcano played, and I was kind of keeping an eye on both of these, and I don't remember where I was when Rally became a part of it. I just remember that it became a thing, and I was kind of on board with it, where I was like, okay, it's still not really clear how this works, but okay. And just when I was thinking about buying into it, people started adding Jace to it, and I was like, well, there goes me. And so I've been following it, and I haven't really played against it too much. I don't have a lot of experience playing against it. But it's definitely, like I said, I love a good graveyard deck as much as the next girl. So I'm really happy it's doing well, and it keeps people on their toes. So I'm all for it.
I have a video on my YouTube channel, and I think you may have seen it when I was playing Eldrazi Ramp versus Aristocrats before it was Rally. And there was all kinds of Sidisi's Faithful kind of shenanigans, pre-Jace when it was more of a budget deck. Interesting addition here is Catacomb Sifter.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of Liliana, just because if things are dying, you might as well be playing Liliana, I suppose.
Absolutely.
And then Collected Company, I don't remember seeing in the version I played against online. I think it's because I was playing against Blue-Black, and this is 4-color Rally. So now that we're talking about 4-color Rally, let's talk about what the final 8 were at the TCG Player Invitational. Now, they're horrible about updating who won tournaments and that kind of thing, so I actually don't know who won. I just know what the top 2 were.
Adam Yurchik did, and there are deck lists on TCG Player going down to 12th place, I believe.
What deck was he playing?
He was on Abzan.
Okay, so Aggro won the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 4-color Rally versus Abzan Aggro.
Yeah.
3rd and 4th place were 4-color Rally and Abzan. 5th to 8th was 4-color Rally and Abzan. And Atarka Red and Mardu.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see Mardu back. Crackling Doom is still an amazing card. So
oh, totally.
I'm assuming it's going to have Soulfire Grandmaster in there somewhere.
Well, Dark Jeskai already runs the both of them.
Mm-hmm.
The Mardu deck that I faced the other day, my friend Jory was actually piling it. I got paired against my friend in the first round, and I was like, oh, Jesus. And so he started off as a Mardu tokens deck. He had the Dragon Fodder, and, he was kind of going wide, and then he would top it off with Gideon and some other shenanigans. And then post-board, he turns into a Mardu control deck. So it really depends. There are so many ways to do Mardu. I personally enjoy the Mardu Planeswalkers deck myself. itself. But there's really a lot of ways you can do it. And the mana is so good right now where, you can see it's very easy to splash for something like Crackling Doom. And I don't think it takes a lot of effort at all.
Yeah, I agree with you that it is kind of fit things together as you wish, but Planeswalkers just seems like a consistent way to go.
Yeah.
With such good Planeswalkers for those colors.
Yeah.
Last year, the weakness when Crackling Doom came out was Jace was absolutely horrible.
Well, not to mention there are so few things that actually deal with Planeswalkers. We came from a standard that had things like Banishing Light and whatever, and now it's like, you have Utter End, but not everybody's running it, and if they are, it's like one copy. Silk Wrap is all the rage, but it doesn't affect Planeswalkers. You can maybe counter a Planeswalker, but there's just not as many ways to deal with them, I think. You can't Crackling Doom a Planeswalker. Well, you could Gideon, but that's a different story, but, by and large, I just feel like there's not enough tools against Planeswalkers in general, so they are kind of allowed to do their thing, which I think makes them really strong.
Yeah, exactly. You can Crackling Doom them before they flip, but that's assuming it's one from Origins that has not flipped yet.
Right, and there's such bigger creatures out there, like the odds of you Crackling Doom and landing a Nissa. Like, you don't want to be wasting a Crackling Doom on a Nissa, you just don't. You want to be wasting it on something like a Silumgar or an Ojutai or something like that, and you're certainly not going to get a Crackling Doom out of Jace, so it's just not something you want to be doing.
Certainly. Anything else about TCG Player before we move on?
They do a really good show. They get a lot of flack for, obviously it's a controversial thing to be able to buy your entry. A lot of people don't like that you can buy your points off of eBay, and it leads to sort of this feeling of, whether or not people deserve to be there, for lack of a better word, and also that you can buy buys. With enough points, you can just not show up for the first 3 rounds, and you're only playing 7 rounds on day 1, so it's very easy to, be 3-0, and then you only need to be 5-2 to make day 2, so you could spend points on 3 buys and then come back and just go 2-2 and then you make day 2, and day 2 is guaranteed to get at least $250. So there's always a lot of talk about the integrity of the tournament, and it's definitely still not as polished. It hasn't been around for as long as an Open is. So people like to complain about things and how it's not run smoothly. But I do feel like it gets better every year. I thought Frank and Kenji were a really good commentary duo. They had Craig Wesco pop in for some rounds as well, which I thought was really nice. And they just put on a really good show. I was really happy to see them here. And I would play again next year with a little more preparation.
Speaking of EV, I actually saw some praise from Sam Black about the EV of the tournament, that he lost out on, I think, top 16, but still went home with $250.
Yeah, and like I said, the pros are really happy with it. Adrian Sullivan was promoting it, and Ali Antrazi, of course, was. And, the pros were happy to be there. I definitely wasn't hearing anything from them. But like I said, it is something that comes up every once in a while about, what do people think about a tournament that you can sort of buy your way into? Magic is very much a meritocracy where people like to feel like you're earning things. And, there are sometimes people who say, well, you didn't earn your points. Somebody gave them to you and all that stuff. And I think that's kind of silly.
I think it's interesting and should be explored more, and the idea of a currency that helps you get into a tournament. It adds to the economy of the game, makes it about more than just cards. It's an interesting idea, even if it's not being done perfectly.
Well, one of the things I like to say is, I like to use the phrase, let something happen and then let God sort out the bodies. Like, that's my theory about Modern, is sort of unban everything and let God sort out the bodies. And the way I feel about the TCG events is, so what if somebody from Tupelo bought their seat into the Invitational? Let variance sort it out. If that person is good, then they're meant to make day 2 and they're meant to win the whole damn thing. But, if they're not very good, then what does it matter? I think ultimately it comes down to, did you prepare? Are you good? Do you have the skill? I think that should be more important rather than how did you get here?
Totally. I mean, they're not going to win just because they spent money on getting there.
Right. I mean, I have friends who did do that. I have friends who are good players, but for whatever reason, they just didn't have the points and they did not do well. I also know people who did, quote unquote, earn their seat and they also didn't do well. And, ultimately, variance sort of settles that. All
right. Before we move on to the lightning round, I'm going to yield the floor to you because there's a community issue you're very passionate about. And you recently attended a meeting about this issue, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Well, it wasn't like a meeting like in a conference room or anything special. I just simply had a discussion with the owner of Pastimes, which was the TO of the Invitational. The TO sent me a DM, and at first, so he asked me if I was going to the Invitational, and me being me, I was just like, oh God, what did I do? What did I say? I'm thinking I'm like banned before I even go. Like, who did I piss off now? So I'm thinking it's something bad, and I'm kind of bracing myself for it. And he's like, no, you didn't do anything. We love your work. He's like, but I understand that you were involved in the recent discussions surrounding converting bathrooms, which is a really common practice at GPs, and specifically the Gong Show that was Pittsburgh. And he was like, would you mind just sort of chatting with me about that? Like, as a TO, we certainly want to avoid that, and we're looking to get better, and you seem to be at the forefront of the discussion. And I was like, sure. And so after my modern event was over yesterday, we just, we just went to like an empty table and had a discussion, and he was kind of telling me about there's a lot of things that we, the public, don't know in terms of like what goes on in organized play and what they go through as TOs. And I was really fascinated to learn like how much it costs to rent a venue, and, what the venue requires to give them a concession stand, and little details like that. I thought that was really cool. But, he just really wanted to know, like, how can you, if a TO has to convert bathrooms, what is the way to do it while offending as few people as possible, if there's a way to even do that, or if you even have to convert the bathrooms. And so we had a nice talk about that, and we talked a lot about communication and how, if you're going to do that, people have to not only know that you're doing that, but they have to know where they can find these bathrooms. If a woman walks up to the bathroom and sees her sign crossed out, there better be a sign telling her where to go so she can find a bathroom. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen a lot of the times. And also there's the issue of equality, where it's like, if I have to go all the way across the venue to use the bathroom, but yet the dudes just have to go 5 feet away, well, that's a problem too. And just things like that. And ultimately, I think that situation will get better once the TOs start getting a bit more firm about their attendance. A part of the problem, I think a lot of the problems that come from GPs stem from the fact that the TOs they sort of predict their attendance, where they're like, oh, well, I predict that we're going to get 2,000. And there's a lot of wiggle room there, largely based on the fact that Magic players like to procrastinate and they don't register till like the week before. And specifically, Alan, the TO of Pastimes, the owner, he kind of wants to stop that. He's like, I would like to cut off registration like a month before and just be like, a hard cap and be like, I can comfortably give an event to 2,000 people. If you're late, oh well, you can feel a certain way about it. But part of the reason these GPs are going so poorly is because you're making exceptions for all these procrastinators. You're saying you can comfortably seat 2,000, but then, oh, all right, we'll let 200 more come, and then it's hell for the rest of us. And so having a TO just sort of be a bit more firm and say, no, this is as many as I can comfortably do. Too bad for you, but I need to give these 2,000 a really great show. And I think that by enforcing those caps, there will be less of a need to convert bathrooms, because you can say, okay, well, if I'm having 2,000 people and I estimate that 80% of them might be male, I think we can still have, 3 men's bathrooms and be okay. Like, I don't think we'll need 4. But when you're doing this sort of predicting wiggle room, kind of like closing your eyes and pointing at a number in the phone book kind of thing, you are having to start converting bathrooms, and it just turns into a really big mess.
I agree with you 100%. It's a thing, it's a problem that even conventions have.
Yeah.
Which is the smaller conventions. The bigger ones have their crap put together, but the smaller ones, they'll want to make more ticket sales. Mm-hmm. So they'll have their soft cap, we'll call it, and then maybe a month before or a few weeks before, they'll say, oh, no, we'll make more tickets for sale, without realizing that tickets are not something you can just make out of thin air. Mm-hmm. You actually have to be able to accommodate the people, and so what you end up with is super long lines to registration, not enough bathrooms for all genders involved, and it becomes a huge mess when you don't want to enforce the cap and you really need to for those purposes.
Yeah, and it's also different because, like I said, Magic does have a bit of a gender issue, and, it's different because, some women are already feeling excluded, from the game, and they're already feeling left out. There are some people at events who actively don't want them there, and then on top of that, you finally get the courage to go to an event, and then what do? You see your sign crossed out. That sort of adds to the feeling of not being wanted. And, I remember when we first started the girlfriend bracket, one of the complaints that we received was that we were too focused on bathrooms, because we talked about it for like a good 2 episodes, and people were like, it can't be that big of an issue, but like that was right up there with like when the complaints that we would hear from women about why they didn't go to their local game stores or why they didn't go to events. Bathrooms were right up there, where either the bathrooms were dirty, they didn't even have a bathroom. Like there were some stores that had like a urinal and they were like, where are we supposed to go? And so it was an issue. It was a reason why women weren't going to events. And, that was something I definitely stressed to Alan. And we had a really lovely talk. We talked for about 30, 45 minutes, and he definitely gets it. And I'm anxious to see how the TOs adapt to this.
It's an awkward situation when you show up at a tournament. They're like, oh, we didn't think any girls would be showing up. I'm sorry, we crossed out the sign. It's like if you have 5 friends coming over and they all ask for pizza, right? Mm-hmm. And so then when the 5th person gets there, you're like, oh, I didn't think you were coming. I gave everyone else your slice.
In their defense, I don't think it's anything like that. Like, I don't think it's the Wizards doesn't want women there. I certainly don't think the TOs don't want them there. But, they do sort of have to find that balance of, it is obvious that 80% of their attendees are going to be male, and, I was there for GP Chicago 2 or 3 years ago where it was like one bathroom for the guys and it got grisly. So from a logistics standpoint, I understand. Like, I get why they have to do it, but I do think that if they simply, had a cap, stuck with the cap. And I think if they just had a better idea of who they could comfortably accommodate, maybe we wouldn't need to convert bathrooms then. You would know that 2,000 people can comfortably use 3 men's restrooms, and that's fine.
So it comes down to if you know how many attendees you're going to have a month before, mm-hmm. You also know how many bathrooms you need a month before. Yes.
And that's the thing is, part of the reason that Pittsburgh wins so poorly is they were doing a lot of this stuff on the fly, where it was like, like you have those, one of the common tropes that you see in television is like the house party where everybody shows up, like somebody has a flyer and this girl thinks she's going to have the teenager thinks they're going to have a house party because mom and dad are gone, and they invite a few of their friends, and suddenly they have a house full of people and lamps are getting broken and things like that. It's kind of like that with GPs. You invited 1,000 of your closest friends, and then 2,000 showed up, and they start breaking things and making things uncomfortable. But, if you just get a bit more selective with who you invite, it gives you more time to put out a better spread, really think about how many bathrooms you need, and like I said, just ultimately just putting on a better show. That's what it boils down to, like just putting on a better show for everybody involved.
Well, now that you've given us the analogy of the day, because that was just the best analogy I've heard all day, we can move on to the lightning round. Now, usually the lightning round is a series of questions, but in this case, instead of having questions, I'm going to read some copy that I've written down, and you can interject as you feel free to do so. But I'm going to spend a few minutes on a quick follow-up on a sub-episode I recorded with Ben Cotty of the UK from Mana Lake a few weeks ago when the new Kozilek and the new Wastes mana symbol was spoiled. And we speculated for a bit about what the new mana symbol meant, and pointed out that for all intents and purposes, even if it just means just colorless mana, requiring it to cast Kozilek equates it to a 6th color. When an as-yet unconfirmed spoiler hit the internet showing the Expedition Mystic Gate, the Azorius Filterland, with the waste symbol replacing the colorless symbol, what we've seen on Mystic Gate would lead us to believe that the new mana symbol will be applied retroactively through Oracle text updates to some, most, or all sources that would produce colorless mana. So as Ben and I discussed when Kozilek was first spoiled, and Magic Mike's also discussed that same week when you guys were talking about my article, and I went and I watched it, and I went to the live stream the next week, and you talked about another article. It was like Christmas. It was incredibly confusing. We pointed it out. You guys pointed it out. It's incredibly confusing why Wizards would include a new basic land type, a new mana symbol, and seemingly replace some, most, or all colorless mana symbols, which are not to be confused with generic mana, with this new mana symbol in the second set of a block, the small set of a block. I mean, just look at the mana sources in Battle for Zendikar. Hedron Archive, Sanctum of Ugin, Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. Okay, I guess I'm just listing cards from Green, Red, Eldrazi at this point, but still, there are mana symbols that Wizards just printed a few months ago with colorless mana symbols.
I actually don't understand what much of the discussion's about. Like, for me, it's a very basic concept. Like, I feel like I understand it very well, and I feel like people are just sort of confusing themselves. So it's really not that difficult. The reason why the colorless symbol exists, so let's take, for example, the Kozilek that was spoiled, and I, for one, am very excited about this as a ramp player, where it's like, sweet! That's like magical Christmas land to me, but, so with the two of those symbols, so Kozilek costs 8 of the colorless as we know it right now, and then it has 2 of the new colorless symbols. And what that's saying to people is that, okay, girl, you can play any color, you can put this in any color deck that you want to, and you can spend any color of mana you want on that 8. But 2 of that has to be colorless. That means you can't use red mana, you can't use green mana. And I think it goes with the flavor of the set. You do have a mechanic like Devoid, which a lot of people have written off as being sort of, just a wall of text and not really meaning anything, but there is this sort of emphasis on colored but not quite. And so I'm not surprised to see this becoming a thing. And, it simply is saying people that, if you have a deck like Tron, for example, that it's majority colorless mana anyways, it's not really going to matter to them because that's all that they make. But I do think it makes the cards a little more difficult to splash, which is usually people's first instinct is to, oh god, I'm going to put it in this deck and put it in this deck. And typically just being a colorless spell, like something like Karn that costs just 8, makes it really easy to splash. You can put it in any deck you want to. But I like that they're sort of creating these colorless cards that need to be in decks that make colorless mana. I think it's a flavor win. I think it's a mechanic win. I don't see a problem with it. But for whatever reason, everybody else is just confused.
I think the main issue here is that it appears that they're going to be retroactively applying the symbol through errata and through Oracle text, which is, it's interesting. I'm not so much complaining about it, but it is an interesting decision to make this late in the game, but also halfway through a block that the first set also has things that this would apply to.
I can understand some of the criticism where it's like, I feel that if you were going to debut this, you should have debuted it at the start of the block. But then people could also use the argument of, you wonder how far people are going to take that argument. We're like, why didn't you do it in Dragons? And it's like, oh girl, like, no. So I think no matter when they put it in a set or a block, people were going to say that it was unexpected or that it was too late or whatever. But the bottom line is that they're doing it and I don't really have a problem with it. And, it kind of makes sense. It's like, so Mystic Gate makes a colorless mana. So why not change it to the colorless symbol? Like, I don't really, I can understand wanting to separate the two, and I'm all for it.
Oh, yeah, it's a great idea to separate the two because of all the confusion that comes with teaching a new player how to play Magic. You're like,
that too.
This is colorless and this is colorless, but it's not the same thing.
Right, and people, I remember I tried teaching an ex-boyfriend how to play, and he was playing, I think, a black infect deck. This was years ago, and he was like, he would see the colorless thing, and if, let's say something had one colorless and a black symbol, a lot of people tend to interpret that to just mean one black. Like, they look at the colorless symbol as the number telling them how many skulls they need, and having to explain to people, no, you need one mana of any color, and then a black mana, and that never really goes over quite well. You often have to come back to that concept. So to, give colorless its own symbol, I think makes it easier to teach as well. There's not that overlap of, I can use any color? Well, what if I have this land right here? No, that's fine too. And then, I have a colorless, but I don't have a skull. What does that mean? And you're right. I think it does make it easier to teach people too.
I just encountered that teaching my 5-year-old how to play Magic cards. At first, he was having trouble, but then after a while, after about 10 minutes, he was like, oh, that's 2.
Yeah.
1 plus a black is 2, because everyone needs to start learning with mono black.
Yes. Yeah, I was teaching people at PAX this year. I had the opportunity to actually work with Wizards and Lady Planeswalker Society to teach people Magic, and I can remember there was a little girl who, played black, and I was like, come here, honey, and, I'm raising the next generation of black mages, and yeah, I personally taught about 25 people over the course of the weekend. And yeah, that was definitely something that kept coming up, was the colorless and color symbol thing. That definitely stumped people.
And then there's Ian's niece.
Oh god, how great is she? She's decked out in pink, she's in full head to toe princess gear, and she's like, I just want to make zombies. I just want to hug her and be like, come live with me.
That's my daughter. She'll wear a tutu and walk around with a snake toy.
I am completely here for that. I think that's fantastic.
And speaking of Ian, he was DMing me while we were recording, and he said that he totally called that tokens are going to be a thing in Modern, and apparently they're starting to pick up. So he wanted that to be said, I think. So there you go, Ian. There's your shout-out.
Love Ian. He's so great.
So speaking of last episode, let's move on to the community question, shall we? So last episode, we asked what Modern deck you think will be the strongest at Star City Games Invitational this weekend. So this episode, since it's a dual format tournament, we're shifting gears and asking, what standard deck do you think will have the strongest position and put up the most consistent numbers at the SCG Invitational? Since it's a dual format, it's about consistent numbers. So we each get to answer, and then our listeners will get to answer as well.
As much as it pains me to say, because I very famously don't like red, I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be Atarka. Like I said earlier, it's the deck that nobody wants to see. The cards that Atarka doesn't want to see, the cards that are good against Atarka, are typically white. And, it's things like Surge of Righteousness. It's things like Irration Cleric. And really the only decks that are kind of maxing out on those are like the Esper decks. You really don't see Jeskai Black packing anything like that in large numbers. You really don't see Abzan bothering with things like that. It's the deck that people don't want to see, but they're also not prepared to commit as many sideboards to it because the sideboard cards are so narrow. And I think it's very hard to attack, or even if you have those sideboard cards, even if you play 1 Siege Rhino, play 2 Siege Rhino, that's nice. You've got an 18/18 double striking trampler Zergo Bellstriker coming for your face. It just doesn't matter. And it's also kind of the end of a standard. Like, we're going to get Oath spoilers pretty soon. And, I think people are just kind of over things. They want new cards. They want new mechanics. These leaks are kind of making people's mouths water. Like they just want to see what else is out there. And so I can see people kind of just being like, like everything's kind of explored. This is the format. What are we going to do about it? And I think it's just going to be a Tarka Red, as much as I don't like to say it.
Looking at the list, I'm kind of thinking Esper Dragons could make a good showing this coming weekend. It's just a matter of what would be consistent. So I think as far as consistency goes, you might actually be right that people are going to pick a Tarka Red and Siege Rhino just as ways to get consistent numbers. Modern, I've already made my prediction, but I'm thinking Tron and Twin are going to do some consistent numbers with the current meta. So we'll see about that. Answer both questions, folks. Go and answer the Modern question on the other episode. Answer this question. Let's see what's going on with the SCG Invitational in the next episode.
Did I tell you that I qualify for one?
Do you?
Right. How scary is that?
And you didn't buy this one.
No. Okay, so technically I didn't buy the other one, but
I'm just
how
joking.
I qualified for that? No, so I got an email the other day from Jared Silva, who's the he handles the organized play for Star City Games, and he sends me an email and he's like, "Hello, will we see you in Vegas?" And I'm like, "No, like I don't qualify for things. Like this has to be a mistake." And he's like, "No." He's like, "I can verify that you have an invite to a Star City Games Invitational, and the invites are good for a full year. So if you can't make it to Vegas, you have until December 2016 to attend one of the 3 remaining invitationals." And I'm still pressing the issue because I'm like, seriously, I top 8'd states, but I know that only the person who won states got the invitational invite. I didn't do well at an open. I didn't do well at an IQ. This has to be a mistake. I was like, I am not on my podcast. I was like, I have 2 girls that are the grinders. They are the good players. I'm just the entertainment. I don't qualify for things. So I'm badgering him about this. And he's like, all right, you had open points. So the system that's going to be rotating very soon, you were allowed to bank these Star City points. And over the course of a year, I accumulated enough and my top 8 at states pushed me over the threshold. So he's like, yes, you do in fact have an invitational invite. And I'm like, holy crap. So now I have to actually start caring about standard because they got rid of legacy as one of the invitational formats. They're only standard and modern now. So now I'm like, oh, hell. So I have to actually keep one foot in standard because Lord knows there might be a standard that I like and a deck that I like, and that'll have to be the invitational that I go to. So that's weird.
If it were me, for symmetry's sake, I'd just play Tron in both formats.
Yeah, I actually play ad nauseum in Modern. Like, I'm very happy with it. I've thought about building Tron, but some of the pieces are wildly expensive, and I'm not sure I'd really want to commit to it. So I'd probably play ad nauseum. And the invitationals are quarterly, so we don't know what the standard... I'm assuming the metagame would be different around the time of each one. So we'll see what the format looks like around that time. We'll see if I have a deck that I like, and I guess I'll be going to an invitational.
All right, that's exciting.
Yes.
So now that we're at the end of the episode, you get to provide whatever social media information you wish to provide.
Oh God, I have so much. I'm so sorry.
Settle in.
Whenever I get new followers, I'm like, I am so sorry, you guys. Like, you guys deserve so much better than me. So I'm Erin. You can find me on Twitter at Original Estrus. That is ORIGINALOESTRUS. You can email me at estrus@elitistjerks.com. My podcasts are on Twitter at the GF Bracket and also at Magic Mike's Cast. I believe that's the Twitter for Magic Mike's. You can also watch Magic Mike's every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time at twitch.tv/Magic Mike's. Gathering Magic is the host of the Girlfriend Bracket, and I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. If you forget anything, we'll just put it in the Oracle text.
Yeah.
You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/Joseph_Dunlap. You can find me in the Facebook group for Magic the Gathering because I'm always posting articles on there. And you can find me on Reddit. I'm always on Reddit, J Dunlap Media.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. You could sneeze and get downvoted on Reddit.
Yeah.
And then you can find Draw 4 Podcast on soundcloud.com/draw-4-podcast. And then we're also under the Player 4 Podcast umbrella. So youtube.com/c/Player 4 Podcast. Twitter and Facebook, just find Player 4 Podcast. That's the URL. You can email player4podcast@gmail.com and we will answer you. And you can also find both podcasts on iTunes. So go listen to us on iTunes, although if you're on YouTube, you get to see funny pictures. This has been Draw 4 Podcast. Until next time, we wish you good fortune, and may you draw well.